Hey everybody, how you doing? Guess what? That underwater DLC I mentioned last month finally got released. Let's do this tumble Aquaman style. Oh man, that DLC was a liar. It said very clearly in the promotional booklet you would get infinite air with this DLC. That was not infinite. That was very finite air. Okay, so for this video, let's talk about how Blackbeard could control an entire zombie army using the power to manipulate people's shadows, which sounds incredibly badass in a variety of ways. Hold on though a second, my hair is ridiculous, so we're gonna spend the rest of this we're gonna spend the rest of this episode wearing a hat. I'm not really one to wear baseball hats, I never really got into it, but I'm dipper teching for the purposes of this. Okay, so, Blackbeard controlling the power of the Kage no Mi. Something very likely that is to occur. Actually, something that is 100% going to occur, depending on how you look at it. Whether Moria is going to join up with Blackbeard's crew, and then Blackbeard just uses his powers for his own gain, or they just kill Moria and then take his powers, and so Blackbeard could have them, either himself or somebody in his crew that could have it. That's pretty much going to happen now, because we saw Moria at Blackbeard's place. But here's the thing that you got to talk about is, Moria is an example of a character that was really kind of stupid, that had this ridiculously OP ability. Well, I don't know if it's fair to call Moria stupid. He wasn't the sharpest Mato in the sword shop, certainly, but he was just very slothful. You know, he just laid around all day and just like, make other people make me the king of the pirates. You know, I don't really care about that kind of stuff. So, you know, he didn't really want to do things on his own, right? So that was a downfall of Moria, but his fruit was still ridiculously overpowered, so even a slothful person like him that used it still got really, really strong, right? Okay, so here's the deal. Blackbeard actually using this power in a smart way, that is terrifying. That should be terrifying. Think about it. Blackbeard rising up an army of zombies for him to rule under his darkness. You could make an entire, 100 chapter side story just revolving around that, where the Straw Hats don't even appear. And I would still read every chapter, review every chapter, make love to every chapter every single night until the next one came out. That's a pretty epic thing, right? Okay, so at the end of Marineford, we had Doflamingo having, Moria dead to rights, with the pacifistas and everything, and they have that line where it's like, the higher-ups want you taken out. At first, I just assumed that was because Moria showed his weakness. He got defeated by Luffy at Thriller Bark, he got defeated by Jinbei during Marineford, and he was just not somebody that they could really trust anymore with the position of Warlord. So they decided, we just had this big epic war, we're just gonna have it in the papers that Moria died during the war, and then, we could replace him. That's what I originally thought. But then you start thinking, no, the world government probably was very desperate at that time, considering that Blackbeard rose to power and had the power of the Gura no Mi now, and they're like, okay, no more playing around. We need to gather the strongest fruits that we have under our control, and we need to give them to people that are actually going to use them, okay? Moria, you're a freaking lazy piece of crap that just sits around on your island all day, amassing your zombie army, when you have the power to literally resurrect the dead. The world government's going to need that power, okay? So I think that's the main reason they sent Dofi out to go and retrieve the Kage no Mi, kill Moria, take his fruit, and then the government could give it to somebody else in their entourage that would actually use it for their own benefit, right? Instead of just amassing a zombie army somewhere out there in the Florian Triangle, right? And keep in mind, the zombies that Moria creates retain the memories from when they were alive. Now, it is true that using a shadow of a living person and putting it into a marionette does affect their personality in a little bit, like putting Brook's shadow inside of Ryuma's body, changed Ryuma's speech patterns, of course. He talked like Brook, and the techniques he used were Brook's techniques and things like that. He had his mannerisms that were like Brook's, but he still remembered who he was. He remembered he was Ryuma, he was a samurai from Wano, he knew his sword, he fought with the honor and the code of being a samurai, although I guess you could say that came from Brook as well, because Brook is not the kind of backstabby kind of fighter either. He still clearly remembered who he was. So I think the world government would definitely want that power, Or take the Kage Kage no Mi, give it to somebody. It doesn't have to be like a Gorosei or Imsama. Just give it to like a high-ranking member of the government that they trust, and then have them start rising all of the famous people of the past back from death, and they're completely subservient to them, because that's another aspect of the Kage Kage no Mi. Now, there does appear to be somewhat of like a grace period, especially when you're putting a shadow of a different size than the marionette. Like when they put Luffy's shadow in Oars' body, when Oars first awoke, he was insubordinate, he wouldn't listen to anybody, but eventually he realized, like, I need to get back to my master, Master Moria, and he would listen to whatever Moria said without fail. Now, there were a few exceptions to this when other people were trying to command the zombies. Like, Moria had absolute control over the shadows, over the zombies, alright? Whatever Moria said was law. But he would delegate power to the other members of the Mysterious Four. Like, he would be like, you know, all the general zombies and soldier zombies, you'll listen to Absalom. But it wasn't like a 100% ironclad rule whenever Absalom ordered them around, because he wasn't the one that had the fruit. Alright, so it was like a secondhand thing. So some of, like, I remember like Captain John, he was a general zombie. When he woke up, he was getting kind of drunk, and he's like, whatever. He's like, Captain John, get over here. And he's like, fine. And eventually, of course, we had the whole thing with Sindri, who was being ordered around by Hogback, and she wouldn't listen to his orders eventually. So yeah, you can delegate powers with the shadows, but it's not absolute. But the owner of the power does have absolute control over them. I think I have to explain to you how devastating that could be in the hands of the world government. The world government has the power of the Kage Kage no Mi. They could resurrect Joy Boy with all of his memories, and he would work for them, or they could resurrect anybody in the past that has died. So that's gotten me to this idea. If Blackbeard now has the power of the Kage Kage no Mi, either just through Moria, or they have the power of the fruit itself, they just killed Moria and then are using the powers, what would be one of the first people you would want to resurrect, you would want to work on your side when you're Blackbeard, one of the Yonko? Whitebeard. You would want Whitebeard working on your side. Not just from the massive amounts of power that would give you, but just the symbol of it. Like, this was the strongest man in the world. He's now a zombie, and he works for me now. Now, of course, he doesn't have the power of the Guru Guru no Mi, but that doesn't matter because Blackbeard already has it, right? In fact, I don't even know if this is likely. I don't even know if he would want to do this. But if Blackbeard has the power of the Kage Kage, and they somehow manage to get to Sphinx Island where Whitebeard and Ace's bodies are, and they bring back Whitebeard, could Blackbeard give him the Guru Guru powers back? In fact, that would be a smart move, you'd think, because Whitebeard had all the experience of using his powers for years. And then, you know, Blackbeard's only had it for 2. And I'm sure he's gotten better at using the Guru Guru no Mi since Marineford, obviously. When he just got it, he couldn't control it very well. It's only been 2 years, though. Whitebeard Pops probably had that power for decades, right? So I don't know if he could do that. I don't know if he could bring back a zombie and then just you give him back the Guru Guru no Mi, and then he's still a zombie, so he'll still listen to everything the owner of the fruit has without question. In that situation, though, he would definitely want to make sure that he had the powers himself, because that is not something you could trust with Moria. You couldn't be like, okay, Moria, use your Kage powers to resurrect Whitebeard, and then you'll be in control. No. So that has to be either. I don't even know if Blackbeard would have given the power to someone else in his entourage, like Davon. Well, Davon has the nine-tailed fox, or like Vasco Shot, or somebody like that. Like, you wouldn't want them to have it either. You would want to have the powers over that powerhouse right there. You would want to have the control over Whitebeard. Now, I know many of you might not be fans of this, because we're kind of turning this into late Naruto when, you know, Kabuto was resurrecting all of the famous ninja that died in the story, and also the ones from the history. You know, like, I like that. That was cool. I mean, like, remember that chapter when Kabuto brought back all of the freaking zombies? Like, there's Kimimaro, and there's the Kage, and oh my god, that was really cool. So yeah, that's a bit of an issue, and I can understand why you wouldn't want that to happen, because Whitebeard's death was so impactful in the story. It was so great that what he did, you know, that moment where he's standing there on his own 2 feet and they're just going over all the battle damage he incurred, and he's like, he never turned, he never retreated. That is the strongest man in the world. That is Edward Newgate right there. And, you know, him to be brought back from the dead under Blackbeard's rule, I mean, like, considering Blackbeard's past history with Whitebeard and everything, I mean, I can't say Blackbeard doesn't think about that. Like, if he has the power of the Kage no Mi, the thought has definitely entered his head to bring back Whitebeard. Now, if he's going to do that, that's another story. First off, he would have to, I don't even know if they know where his corpse is. Even if they do find out Sphinx Island, you know, Marco's there and everybody, and they might try to defend the island and the minks as well. So there's that issue they have to deal with. But still, I mean, Blackbeard might go there, defeat Marco. Hey, if they defeat Marco, kill him, bring his body back as a corpse, and then dig up Whitebeard and then use him. Now, there's another problem with this, and it involves Ace. Because Ace is buried right next to Whitebeard. So even if Blackbeard managed to get all the way to Sphinx Island, fight through Marco, managed to get to the grave and start digging up Whitebeard, to be like, well, Ace's grave is right there. We should dig him up and bring him back as a zombie as well. And I don't want that to happen. Like, Whitebeard's death was really impactful and everything like that, but Ace's was way more so, in my opinion, because we knew Ace for a lot longer before that. He had a direct connection to the main character of the series, Luffy. They were brothers and everything. You know, Whitebeard was awesome and everything like that, but Ace's death was more palpable, I think, for me, and I would really personally not want him to come back as a zombie. I mean, you could do stuff with that. I mean, you totally could. Like, Luffy facing off against his brother, that would be, like, a crazy encounter, but I would really not want to see it. But you gotta figure, like, if Blackbeard has the power, you know, and it's like, hey, I can go there and bring him back, Whitebeard, you know, Ace is right there. Why would I just like, well, we went to the trouble of digging up Whitebeard. Should we dig up Ace? I'm like, nah, my arms are tired. I don't feel like doing that today. Let's just take Whitebeard, you know? Now, you could always skirt around that in any number of ways. You could just say, like, they open up the grave, but Ace wasn't there. Like, he was never buried there to begin with or something, or someone retrieved his body beforehand. Or, I guess, the ultimate thing, you could just say, oh, the Kage no Mi doesn't work on Ace for reasons. Like, that would be a really lame way of doing it, but, I mean, yeah, you have to figure also, one of the reasons that Moria got so far in his zombie army was he had Hogback working directly for him, because we don't really know the full limits of the Kage no Mi. Like, the body has to be somewhat patched together in a decent way for the zombie to kind of function, you know? Like, Hogback was there robbing graves, piecing them together, patchwork and everything, you know, making sure the zombies were actually fighting worthy, you know, built to do it before the shadow was put into them. But, like, is there a limit to what can and cannot be brought back to life using the Kage no Mi? Like, for example, let's say they took an arm of a corpse, just the arm, and laid it on a table, and Moria threw a shadow into it. Would it work? Would the arm come back to life like freaking Thing from Addams Family and just walking around and crap? Like an animated hand? Would that be how it would work, or would it fail? Would they try to throw the shadow into the zombie arm and it would just reject it because it's not a full body yet? I don't know, because what it seems to be from the Kage no Mi, it just animates any corpse, any dead flesh, because there's even examples of like they took like a tree and like grafted a zombie face onto the tree and they animated that with the damn shadow. So it really does seem like, you know, the soul fruit, that is in the realms of the anything that's not a dead body, but when it comes to like animals or inanimate objects, the soul fruit can animate those into homies. When it comes to the Kage no Mi, it seems like even if you take a tree or something, as long as it has part of it that used to be a living being, that part of a dead body, then the shadow will resuscitate it. So I like to think that, if you were to take an arm of a zombie and throw a freaking shadow into it, it would move around, like in freaking Return of the Living Dead or something. Now, how practical would that be on the battlefield? I mean, aside from creeping out your enemies, having an entire army of hands, you know, crawling at you like disembodied body parts, I don't think really effectual, but I mean, I like to think that's the thing. Like, the shadow just, here is the essence of a living person. We're going to throw it into dead matter, and it's going to move around regardless of whether or not it's like in the shape of a human, if it's a full zombie. Now, there still has to be limits to this, because let's say you have a body that's cremated and just a pile of ash. If you threw the shadow into that, it's the remains of a person, you know. Would that, like, get the ash floating around? No. I think there's a limit to that, right? So, I don't know. I don't want Ace to come back as a zombie, but I could see Blackbeard wanting to do that with Whitebeard, and the thing is, Ace's corpse is right next to Whitebeard, so why wouldn't he? Unless you could say maybe Blackbeard might be like, Ace was a member of the Will of D's, so I don't want to, because Blackbeard has really weird kind of morals sometimes. You ever notice that? It's like most of the time he's just like, I just want to burn the world down. Like, you get that impression from him, but he's also like, an era of dreams will never end. Pirates will always be around, like always shoot for your dreams. He also has those kind of ideals. So you never really understand that with Blackbeard. He's kind of all over the place sometimes. Sometimes you think he's this brilliant Machiavellian schemer. Other times he's walking right up to Magellan like he's not going to get like a deep bath in poison, So I don't know. He might get to, let's say he does get to Sphinx Island. He defeats Marco. He's digging up Whitebeard and they're like, Captain, should we bring back Ace? And then he just like looks down at the grave of Ace and like maybe I'm picturing it's like storming and raining while they're doing the grave robbing shtick, and Blackbeard just looks down at the grave of Ace and is just like, nah, Whitebeard will be good enough. We don't need to bring him back. And they just take Whitebeard back. Okay. Because Whitebeard served as a symbol for so long. As the strongest man in the world, he had the strongest devil fruit or the strongest paramecia capable of ending the world. Even people that were civilians, that were all, by all intents and purposes, should be afraid of pirates. I can imagine them even kind of looking at Whitebeard with some respect. Even the Marines, that their job is to fight pirates, looked at Whitebeard with some respect, okay? And for Blackbeard to use him for his own nefarious plans, and not just Whitebeard, because if he has the power of the Kage no Mi, I could see him going on an expedition all over the world, resurrecting some of the strongest characters that ever lived, maybe a lot of them we just never seen before. So it's not like Naruto exactly, but it's like resurrecting, like, oh, this was this pirate that lived 100 years ago, and he was really cool, but everyone kind of forgot about him, but I remember him because Pops talked about him once when I was on his ship, so I'm gonna go and resurrect him. Maybe stuff like that. He's going to build up a zombie army. I can't think of any other reason why Oda would go to the trouble of like, okay, Moriya's back in the story all of a sudden, and he's directly confronting Blackbeard. That lends to believe that the Kage no Mi and Blackbeard, that lends it to believe, I would say, that Blackbeard is going to utilize the Kage no Mi for his own devices in some way, in some form. I think that's already a foregone conclusion. That pretty much has to happen, right? Unless Moriya somehow manages to escape from Blackbeard's island, but I don't see how that's gonna happen. I mean, he has his zombies, but they have Devon and Shiryu and Lafitte and everybody, and this giant dude, giant amongst giant dudes, and Blackbeard himself. So I don't think Moriya is gonna just be able to just escape the island, without losing his life first and losing his devil fruit in the process. So that's definitely going to occur there. Now, who else could they bring back? Well, I thought about Rox, if Rox is dead now. I mean, he might be. They talked about how the Rox crew disbanded 40 years ago, before Roger's era, and, if Rox were to ever gather his forces back together, then that would just be a whole new, like the Marines wouldn't be able to stop it. That would be like a whole new level of things. Like, that's how badass the Rox crew were. You could say, well, maybe Rox died, at some point between 40 years ago and now, and maybe Whitebeard knew where he was buried. It was in secret because Whitebeard probably had respect for the man as well. And then Blackbeard goes there and resurrects Rox. And then Rox, as a zombie, is like, oh, I'm back now. And Blackbeard's like, Zehaha, I'm your new master. And then Blackbeard's like, gather your past crew. We're going to go and gather your crew together. The strongest crew that ever did sail the 7 or 8 or possibly 9 seas. The jury is still out on the all blue, but let's do this. So that would be a one way to bring Rox back into the story if he really did die. It's just that with the Kage no Mi, you can bring him back. There's also been thoughts that Rox, the reason he was name dropped back then before Reverie was because he was going to be relevant for the very next One Piece movie, Stampede. And we don't know everything about Stampede yet. We got a few teaser trailers for it, but it doesn't seem to be like Rox is going to be in it. It seems like there's going to be a different enemy in the movie, but you never know, right? This might be something like with Shiki. Like, they mentioned Shiki a few times in the manga, and then boom, he's the main enemy of Strong World. So who knows? I don't know. But Rox is certainly on the docket there. Noland, I don't know, Zombie Noland. Like, all right, cool. That's a callback from the past that would be neat to have, right? I have no idea where any of these people are buried. Like, I don't think they're buried in just typical graveyards somewhere. So that would be, of course, hard to manage. Blackbeard has an interest in Wano right now, and he knows what's going on in Wano. He has somebody leaking him information because he knew Luffy was there and everybody. So Blackbeard might very well go to Wano, maybe while the Straw Hats are fighting out against the Beast Pirates, and he might try to resurrect some bodies there. Or I threw out this idea. This is something that would be really scary. If everybody working together actually managed to kill Kaido. Because I brought this up before, but it's sort of like a paradox. It's like you can't just leave Wano with Kaido still being there, because then he's just going to get back up and just continue his reign of destruction over the entire island, you know? So you got to figure out some way to either kill Kaido or remove him from the island permanently and make sure he'll never come back. So, beyond killing him, I don't see how else you could do this unless you somehow manage to remove his devil fruit. But even if you removed his devil fruit, he's still a threat. So, I don't know how they're going to do this. I don't know how they're going to, like, kick Kaido out of his home turf that he's had for 20 years and make sure he's not a threat to ever come back again without killing him. But then you take him out, and he's like, "Ugh!" He's like, "We did it! We slayed the dragon!" And then Blackbeard shows up at the end of Wano like, "Zeha! Thanks for doing the hard part for me." And he takes this really strong shadow and he throws it into Kaido and he wakes back up and he obeys he obeys Blackbeard, and then they get out of there and it's like, crap! He now has the power of Whitebeard and Kaido! Oh no! Like, hey look man, I know that seems kind of overkill, right? But if One Piece is going to start amping up, like, what did Oda say about the final war on Raftel? He said it was going to make Marineford look like a kiddie pool in comparison or something. Like, that's like a minor little scuffle compared to the throne wars that are happening. Like, if that's the situation, I'm like, all right, how are we going to start raising the bar here to the point where it's going to be like, what? You know, like, I'm like, okay, Blackbeard having the power of Zombie Whitebeard and Zombie Kaido. He has to do something cool with the shadow powers, because I don't see Blackbeard just doing the same thing Moria did. I don't see Blackbeard like, all right, I'm going to raise an army of just regular zombies, you know, just random riffraff zombies, and that'll be all I do with it. I don't see him doing that. I see him thinking of like the bigger picture here. Like, oh, we got these powers now. We could resurrect Pops, and we could resurrect Rocks, and we could resurrect that, you know, Snap from the Snap, Crackle, and Rocks. Pops. Sorry, I'm thinking of something else. But Blackbeard would be the kind of guy with the bold ideas to like, I'm going to go through all the strongest people that have ever lived and resurrect them. Right? That would be cool. Hey, that might even be a way we can get Odin back. I'm just throwing out ideas here for Odin. If he really is dead, you could bring him back that way. I don't know how it would work, but I mean, you know, we have the power to bring back the dead in One Piece. It does exist. So you always try to make that fit somewhere else. But yeah, what do you guys think about Blackbeard? At least maybe not, if you're not a fan of Whitebeard coming back as a zombie, how do you feel like Blackbeard attempting that? He might attempt it and he might fail. He might go to Sphinx Island to try to do it, or he might send somebody over there to do it. Marco might stop him, then Weevil might show up. Maybe Weevil shows up at the same time Blackbeard does, and Weevil and the Blackbeard crew start duking it out. Maybe it might be something like that. I don't know. But I think that Blackbeard the idea would definitely enter his head. It would definitely come into his head. Like, I have the power to resurrect the dead, and then have them listen to me unconditionally. Why wouldn't I try to use that on the strongest man in the world? It's a no-brainer, you know what I mean? So yeah, let me know what you think about that below. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Dipper Tekking signing out. You know what I really liked about Gravity Falls? Oh no, that's a spoiler. I guess I shouldn't spoil it. It's like the very end of the series, and it's a really great series. So I'd recommend watching it. But the last few episodes, the final battle and the giant thing, you know what I'm talking about? That was a really cool moment.